Hi and welcome back to our third mini lecture in the Contemporary Management series. In the first part, we talked about what it meant to be contemporary work today and how that actually impacts your career going forward. In our second mini lecture, we talked about what is an organisation and what it means to be an organisation in today's environment. And in this mini lecture, we want to define the management process and start to unpack how do I manage? So let's start by having a look at Paul Hawkins' quote here. Now, Paul Hawkins is an environmentalist, an entrepreneur, and an author, and he writes, "Good management is the art of making problems so interesting and their solutions so constructive that everyone wants to get to work and deal with them." And that's essentially it. Management, good management, actually starts by empowering others and motivating others to be there and to come up with solutions that will help create value. And in our last mini lecture, we talked about value and putting a value on value, right? So if we're going to really motivate others to create that value, then good management is about making the problems interesting and the solutions constructive so that they want to get to work and help with. So the management process involves planning, organising, leading and controlling the use of resources to accomplish our performance goals. Now, if we're thinking about at the start where we talked about that open system, and in the open system we have our environmental resources that are transformed within the organisation to create the output, right? So planning, organising, leading and controlling is essentials of the management process in order to get to use those resources that we get and create that outcome. Okay, so let's talk about these planning, organising, leading, controlling. In part one, I also talked about these being the four functions of management. All right, so they're the same. A function of management is the management process as well, right? So planning is setting performance objectives and directing how to get them or achieve it. Organising is arranging tasks, people, and other resources to accomplish the task. Leading is the ability to inspire people to work and achieve the performance. And controlling is measurement. So it's measuring performance and taking action to ensure the outcome meets expectations. All right, so here are them again. They're from Henry Fayol, and Henry Fayol actually said that in order to exist in an organization and effectively transform inputs, we need to think about it in planning, controlling, organizing, leading. All right, so the planning is setting objectives and determining how to accomplish them. And this is important because if we don't know where we want to be, we can't get there, right? So we need to sit down and say, okay, what is it that our outputs want to look like and how do we get there? Controlling is the process of measuring performance and taking action. So if we're not getting an efficient and effective outcome, then we need to take actions and try to improve that situation, right? So that's what controlling is all about. Organising is the process of assigning tasks and allocating resources and arranging activities to implement the plans. So basically, organising is the way in which we work in order to get that outcome. Okay, so how many levels of management do I need? Do I want them functional, divisional, matrix style? How am I going to allocate what level people perform at and who's got accountability and quality management and all of those lovely things that underpin how I assign tasks, because that's critical to how I transform outputs, right? And the last one is leading. So if I'm not arousing enthusiasm and directing effort towards organizational goals, then am I really managing, right? So management and leading are two different things, but the idea behind a management process is that I have to lead the way in which those resources come from input to output process, okay? Henry Mintzberg then went on and said, actually, you know what? The nature of managerial work and the demands placed on those can be determined in a set of 10 managerial roles, and they're actually underpinned by interpersonal, informational, and decisional roles. Okay? So how a manager interacts with others, they could be a figurehead, a leader, or a liaison officer. And that's important because they're all managerial roles. Then when it comes to informational, the question then becomes how a manager exchanges and processes information So their job is also to monitor, disseminate, and be the spokesperson. And a manager also has to use that information in a decision-making process, right? So they're an entrepreneur, they're a disturbance handler, they're a resource allocator, and they're a negotiator. And a manager plays all roles, not just one. And it's important to know that in different circumstances, you have different hats on, right? And if you're not balancing those hats, then it becomes an ineffective manager. So between 1976 and 1981, there was this research that studied 15 successful general managers in 9 corporations, okay? And what they found was that there was a need for agenda setting and networking. Right? So what they did was they looked at these employees and they examined who they were, where they come from, how they behaved, and how those factors were actually varied within the corporate section and the industry setting. But what they found that common to all managerial roles was that they all had agendas and they all were networked. Okay, so these are essential things that come to management. Now, agenda setting is an action priorities that include goals and plans that span long and short-term frames. So what this means is that a manager will come in and go, okay, in order to increase effectiveness and efficiency, we need goals, obviously. All organizations need goals and plans. But I need to set an agenda, right? Which one's a priority, which one's the least priority, and how do I implement that? So a good manager is able to implement their agendas by working with others, both internally and externally, right? And we work with external people in order to get our agenda met by networking. And the networking is the process of building and maintaining positive relationships with people who help may be needed to implement work agendas. So what we're really asking of is, how do I help others and how do others help me in doing my job? And that's where in part 2 we were talking about how in each industry there are these little network groups that get together. And they may be across industries, they may be in the same industry, they may be multiple, right? And someone could be part of multiple networks, which is where you get your work quality up and your outputs up. Okay. So the question which is always posed is, how can I learn the management competencies, right? So I'm doing a management course. How do I upskill in order to understand what management competencies are? And HSM Burns actually responded to that and said, a good manager is a man or woman who isn't worried about his own career or her own career, but rather the careers for those who work for him. Because if we're looking at Richard Branson itself, in the Virgin Corporation, what he also adds to that is that you should train employees so that they can leave, but then support them so they choose to stay. All right, so it's about understanding how you can actually better other people's careers easily. And management is all about how do you keep them here, motivated, engaged, and performing higher than what you would like, what you expect of them, right? So you want a high-performing workforce for you. But we also learn through lifelong learning, right? So we talk about this thing called continuous learning, right? We learn from our daily experiences and opportunities. We learn from our networks. We learn from our social media. We learn from YouTube. We learn from podcasts. We do all these things in order to better our understanding about something. And as a manager, that doesn't stop when you leave university. University is a part of learning, right? You learn some things here, hopefully. But then going forward, you're also gathering skill sets and learning from other sources. And the skill is to translate that knowledge into action that results in your desired performance or an organization's desired performance of you, right? So we're expecting our employees to have high productivity under new dynamic conditions within an organization. And what we tend to do is we forget sometimes that we need to commit to their learning as well. So every manager should ideally have a budget for training. Now that's not always possible in small organizations, but it's about encouraging that environment in which you talk about the things that you've done. You learn from each other and you support each other when you need to make a decision that you're not entirely sure of, right? So managerial learning is a lifelong process. It is not something that comes every day, and that's where you find that having those networks are really valuable because you learn from other people's maturity in that role. So Robert Katz initially started to theorize what are the essential skills that managers need. Okay, so and what he found was that there are 3 common skill sets across all types of managers. Now, these common skill sets, being conceptual skills, human skills, and technical skills, will differ in the balance of required performance, depending on whether you're a lower level, middle level, and a top level manager. Okay, so your conceptual skills may not be that important at that lower level. You may use it, but it may not be that important. But at a top level CEO process, your ability to think analytically and achieve problem solving activities is much higher at your CEO and your executive level. Your human skills to work well in cooperation with people is the same across all levels, but your technical skills, so lower level managers need higher technical skills than your top level managers, right? Because that skill set is counteracted by the conceptual skill set. And these are really important to understand because as you move up in layers of management, you'll find you use different skill sets. The other essential skill sets that managers need is your technical skill set, which I just mentioned. So that's the ability to use a special proficiency or expertise in your work. It may be HR, finance, marketing, whatever it is that you're specializing in. But you also need your human skill. And research, particularly in the last 15 years, has really tapped into this idea that you need emotional intelligence, right? Not only do we have to manage ourselves, but we have to manage our relationship with others. So if we don't understand how other people are operating and what's going on in their life and how that impacts their work, then we're not going to be an effective manager because managerial is all about support, right? So it's about empowering others. It's about getting them motivated to do their job on a day-to-day basis. And if we have good emotional intelligence, we're able to understand others a little bit better and therefore reflect on our own situation and how our value set is interacting with their value set. But we also need conceptual skills. So the ability to think analytical and solve complex problems. So if we're looking at this, Robert Katz's theory, and where he said that there was conceptual skills, human skills, and technical skills, that still holds today. We still need conceptual, human, and technical skills, but what we also need is emotional intelligence, okay? And that's not a fad that ever just went out. So when emotional intelligence first came in, there was this expectation that it would be a fad and it would just fade out. However, emotional intelligence, particularly in the space where we're at, where mental health at work is now prominent, and resilience training is almost mandatory without being legalized, emotional intelligence is even more important today. So getting to know what that means and how that means works for you personally in terms of your career is something that you may want to consider. So there's also this idea that a competent manager is someone that is competent in a range of skill sets. So communication, teamwork, self-management, leadership, critical thinking, and professionalism are all skill sets that a managerial success person has, right? So someone with high success will excel in these areas. As a future budding manager, and for your own career, you might want to start having a think about, particularly when you're at university, because this is a space in which you can actually digest who you are as a person and what that means and where your value set is, and where your strengths and weaknesses are. But it might be really good for you to start thinking about, where are my gaps? Okay, what feedback have I got and in my group work and everything else that I do at university, but also in life today? How do I improve my skills? Because if I'm going to be a manager, then this is important. Okay? All right, so in conclusion, the contemporary workplace today is one that is continuously changing, and it's interdependent on every nation around the world. So it's global, right? We have knowledge experts, we have society expectations on us, we have everything that kind of intersects in order to realize that the way in which we work today is not the same as the way in which we worked yesterday. So understanding those little nuances is really important going forward. We talked about the differences in organisations in terms of what it means to be an organisation today. And we talked about the management process, which has the 4 functions of management embedded within it. And we ended this mini lecture series on the essential managerial skills. So thank you for listening, and I will see you again soon.